I'm John Milkovich. I'm running for Louisiana Senate. I spent 4 years in the Louisiana Senate from 2016 to 2020. My priorities as a state senator were the same priorities that I have as a father, as a husband, as a Christian, as a member of the Shreveport community. And those priorities, I think we need to get back to our basis in faith. I think we need to go ahead and attack the crime problem. I think we need to address budget and taxes. I think we need to go ahead and work on our infrastructure. And I think that together we can do better. We have a major problem with crime in Shreveport. It's not only damaging and diminishing the quality of life for everyone that lives in the city and the surrounding area, but it's also keeping great businesses out and making it difficult for great businesses to continue to stay here. And it's driving people out, driving business away, and it's basically diminishing and hindering our economic growth. And I feel that some specific things can be done to address the crime problem. I believe, for example, as old-fashioned as it may seem, I believe that if people commit violent crimes, they should go to jail. I think we should be willing to evaluate what's going on in terms of the prosecution of people that are committing gun crimes. I think we need to go ahead and pay attention to the efforts that are being made by our undermanned and sometimes exhausted police officers as they talk about arresting some of the same people over and over. I believe if people are committing violent crimes, they need to be in jail and they need to go ahead and be held accountable for their conduct. I also believe that we need to address education. If Shreveport wants to grow, if we want to grow Northwest Louisiana economically, we need to address crime because everyone deserves to live in a safe neighborhood. We need to address education. During the last years, Louisiana's education has not fared well in national studies. We need to be honest about that. I don't think Common Core has been a successful experiment in Louisiana. It has not. For years, we've ranked at or near dead last in academic performance. I think we need to get back to tried and true fundamental educational methods that work. The classic education, phonics, studies in fine literature, and mathematical training, in addition to the industrial and vocational training. I think we need to ensure school safety. I don't think any child in Louisiana should ever go to school fearful for what the school day holds. I think schools should be a sanctum of an enclave of safety for every student. I think we need to address the agenda that's going on in some of the public schools in Louisiana, the transgender agenda, the agenda to cause confusion among children about their moral direction or their identity. I think that's totally wrong. And I think that we need to address infrastructure. Everyone complains about roads. I was very actively involved as a state senator in attending hearings to bring to the attention of state officials roads that were substandard. In fact, I published editorials, I wrote letters to the newspaper, I encouraged other citizens to show up at DOTD hearings to make their voices heard. But this is the fact of the matter. If we want to improve roads and infrastructure, it takes money. And money is going to come from one of two places. It either comes from imposing more taxes, or it comes from looking at the state budget and making sure that we're doing what we can in the state budget to not waste money so that we can have money for roads. That's why I went to the floor of the Senate as the only senator in the 2016-2020 term to propose hundreds of millions of dollars of targeted specific spending cuts. Look, we're talking about the same issues over and over. We're talking about crime. We need to do something. We need to go ahead and support. I was the only member of the Louisiana Senate to vote consistently that 17-year-olds that commit serious crime should be held fully accountable for their actions. I was the only state senator in the 2016 to 2020 term that actually introduced bills to increase the jail time for violent crimes. I believe that we need to respect the work that our police officers are doing. I believe we need more police officers. I have a number of friends that are police officers, and I hear the same story over and over. We're undermanned by 150 officers. We're underpaid, and we're arresting the same people over and over. If some elements of the district attorney's office are not holding repeat violent offenders accountable, we need to address that and make a very public study of what's going on with that. We need to go ahead and hire more police officers. We need to go ahead and increase the salaries of police officers. Shreveport police officers face great challenges with the high crime that we have in this community, the high levels of violent crime. And studies show that Shreveport, within the last few years, has had rates of violent crime higher than places like Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., Atlanta, and Detroit. We can do better. I think we need to support our police, support keeping violent criminals in jail, and go ahead and pay police for their work and hire more police. I think, again, we need to address education. Common Core isn't working. It was forced down the throat of people in Louisiana in 2011. We were lied about what it was going to do. It was so bad that the Department of Education actually did a remake of Common Core that pretended that we were making real changes, and all they did is change some commas around. And to this day, many teachers were driven out of education by Common Core. Many grandparents, parents, and students are frustrated by the nonsensical math and by the curriculum that is substandard. I think we need to reinstitute a valid, standard, classic educational program. And it's important to remember America's educational heritage. In the 17 and 1800s, people that were farmers were literate in Latin and Greek. You had 17-year-olds attending and enrolling in Ivy League colleges that could speak and read Latin and Greek. I don't think we needed Common Core to save us. I don't think we needed a big money agenda to take over public education. I think we need to get back to basics in education. As far as the infrastructure, again, I'm repeating myself, but I think if we're going to have world-class roads, we need to have world-class stewardship of the Louisiana budget. That's why, as a Louisiana senator, and I was named the most fiscally conservative state senator in Louisiana by Dr. John George, who is the CEO of BRF. And what we did as a state senator is, again, we proposed hundreds of millions of dollars of targeted specific spending cuts that did not harm services but reduced wasteful government spending. Crumbling highway infrastructure. Was that the term? I'm asking you a question. Crumbling transportation infrastructure. Very good point. And it gets back to how we're taking care of the budget. Because we could go ahead and impose a lot more taxes on people. The problem is Louisiana, taxpayers in Caddo Parish are paying some of the highest property taxes in Louisiana. Louisiana has citizens pay the second highest rate of sales tax in America. Only Tennessee charges people more in state and local sales tax than Louisiana. And I think if we're going to tax people like this, number one, we need to get our budget sound. Again, and when I talk about the hundreds of millions of dollars of targeted specific spending cuts, which I proposed from the floor of the Senate, I was the only state senator to do that. I proposed things like possibly the richest family in Louisiana was getting subsidies from the citizens, from the taxpayers of Louisiana. We have, at the time, had a executive branch. We had about 38,000 state employees for a state the size of Louisiana. I made a specific, simple proposal. Look, let's go ahead and enact a hiring freeze for 1 year. Not putting anybody out of work, not causing any pink slips to anybody, just saying we're not going to hire continual replacements. We did make some provision, of course, for the governor's office and some executive officials for the state. But why can't we stop or slow the rate of growth of state government? I feel like we have a basic decision to make in Louisiana and in America, and that decision is, are we going to make economic progress based upon free enterprise, free market that values and rewards hard work, innovation, integrity, risk-taking, or are we going to transform or move towards controlled, planned economy with a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of regulation, a lot of taxes, a lot of state spending. I think that we need to move more towards free enterprise and free market economics. I think that grows the economy. I think that's favorable to locally owned businesses, family-owned businesses, small businesses, agriculture, working families. I think our economy grows when the people are allowed to keep more of their money. And the obvious corollary of that is that when families are allowed to keep more of their own money, they get to make the decisions on what they do with the money. They're spending it on their retirement, on their homes, on the education of their grandchildren, on the charities and ministries that they believe are most effective in the community. And I will tell you, as I've been a member of Shreveport Community Church for over 36 years, and I can tell you, and of course I was on the board of directors at one point for the Shreveport Bossier Rescue Mission, and have worked in different ministries in town to homeless people and kids at risk. I believe that the private faith-based programs are much more cash efficient and much more effective, especially since in none of those roles did I or anyone else ever get paid, except for a few people. So we're doing it for free, but it works. And the government programs are not a solution to every problem, and I think we need to get away from that thinking. Now, this may not redound to my credit in every circle, but I was a budget warrior. As I said, I went to the floor of the Senate and proposed hundreds of millions of dollars of targeted specific spending cuts. I also was the only state senator in 2018 that voted against every iteration of creating or increasing the, quote, temporary sales tax, which we still have that temporary sales tax with us, if I'm not mistaken. And I also, I voted against the budget 8 times. Again, that's going to make some people mad, but I voted against the state budget more times than any other member of the Senate, clearly. But and then in 2023, on June 8, 2023, the legislature approved a $45 billion budget, the largest budget in Louisiana history, in violating their prior constraints, or legislative constraints on spending growth. And within hours of the vote for a $45 billion budget, legislators are saying they didn't know what was in the budget. If I had been in the legislature then, I would have, number one, voted against it, and number two, said, look, we need a do-over on this. We're voting on a budget, and we don't even know what's in it. Of course, I was not there. I was not a member of the Senate on June 8, 2023, so I didn't get an opportunity to vote. But the legislature passed the largest budget in Louisiana history and didn't know what was in it, $45 billion. For frame of reference, when I was in the Senate, I voted against budgets that were in the range of 30, 32, 34 billion. I voted against budgets that were $10 billion less than that because of the amount of wasteful spending. We don't need to be subsidizing rich families. We don't need to be growing the state government. We don't need to be investing in bureaucracy. We don't need a huge, massive education bureaucracy, very expensive education bureaucracy in Baton Rouge. I think when I was in the Senate, it was about $1.5 billion a year. Those dollars did not go to teachers. They did not go to school books. They did not go for school buildings. I think we are wasting the taxpayers' money. And the point is, when we cut spending and cut wasteful spending, there's more money available for needed projects, such as infrastructure, such as ports, such as highways. And we can invest in our infrastructure, which helps business, without increasing the tax burden on Louisiana citizens. And I believe that the more money that's in the private sector and in the hands of our working families, professionals, small businesses, locally owned businesses, family-owned businesses, I believe the more healthy the economy is. And I also believe that when our local economy, and I guess I haven't stressed this other point adequately, when we take care of the crime problem, when we take care of infrastructure, when we take care of elementary and secondary education, we will have big companies knocking on our door to come to Northwest Louisiana. You know, in my perspective on this issue may not be lockstep with what many people are saying relative to early child education. Is early child education vital? Absolutely. I will say this, as a Christian, as a father. Of course, my daughter's 30 years old. I'm not sure how much more she needs my wisdom, instruction, and guidance at this point. But I believe that the most important educational locus and framework for small, you're talking about very small children, is the home, the family, the father and mother. And I understand that that is not totally in lockstep with what everyone else is saying on that point. But I need to be very clear and I think honest about my views, because I don't like it when candidates run for office saying one thing, get elected, and do something else. Historically, our education levels at Louisiana are about as bad as they've ever been. And I say that, I recognize at the same time we've got some great principals and superintendents, we've got some fabulous teachers, we have some hardworking students, moms, and grandparents. And by the way, grandparents, especially when it comes to Common Core, you've got aunts, uncles, grandparents, everybody's heard the stories, I've heard them going door to door. But I believe this, I think some of the fundamental lessons in a child's first formative years, I think some of the most vital lessons do come from the home. So I think, I don't think it's wise to forget the critical, essential, and organic, and really God-ordained role that families and parents play in raising and educating small children. And also, I served as the vice chair of the Senate Education Committee. And Ellie and Lindsay, if I can tell you, if you saw the texts that we are giving to small children in Louisiana, I'm not talking just 5th and 6th graders, I'm not talking simply junior high or high school, I'm talking about little kids. For example, my former secretary's granddaughter brought a book home that talked about a 3rd grade boy being involved in, I don't know how to sugarcoat this, homosexual and bisexual, attractions. And the problem was, that book was not alone. I went to the Caddo Parish School Board with it several years ago and actually kind of called the school board out because they were requiring a 7th grade reading a story about 24 young people that were condemned to kill or be killed. It's like, are y'all not reading the memo? We have a violence problem. So I said all that to say this. Our values and our faith and our focus on family is not incorporated into every element of public education. In fact, our public education includes references to suicide, divorce, adultery, violence, sexual assault. I mean, and I know, I hate to even say that, but we have been given that to small grade school children in Louisiana. Okay, so I'm going to come back to something that is perhaps a little bit old school, but I believe, and if you talk to, and I'm blessed to know many of the pastoral leaders in the community of Northwest Louisiana, and if you talk to them one-on-one, and these are the men and women that spend their lives investing in the community and spend thousands of hours working with families, working with broken families, working with single parents, working with parents, single parents that have children, and this is what they will tell you, time after time after time. It's about the family. In fact, I can remember Pastor Pennywell in DeSoto Parish saying that it's about the family. And he says, if you disagree with me, you're wrong. So I think that I think we need to be very mindful as legislators at either a state or federal level to protect the integrity and the function and really the sanctity of the family. I believe also that we need to go ahead and enact school discipline. I know that in Caddo Parish, and actually I saw this as Vice Chairman of the Senate Education Committee for 4 years, the more dangerous, the more out of control, and the more undisciplined and unruly and in violation. And look, we all know kids can be sophomoric and mischievous, and they're capable of pranks. That's not the issue, I can tell you. The problem is that many of our schools are dangerous. In fact, national studies have shown that Louisiana schools are some of the most dangerous schools in Louisiana. I think not only do we need to respect the role of family, I believe that we need to go ahead and reinstitute demand discipline in the schools. I believe that and I think as part of this, and of course I've been blessed to do this, hopefully I played some small role, but I've spent a period of spanning over 20 years working with young kids. And of course I've worked with church kids, I've taught Sunday school to small children, I've done ministry work at the Rutherford House on Sundays, I've preached at the Juvenile Detention Center. And look, I'm not bragging about that. If you told someone in Shreveport what I just say, that they would shrug their shoulders and say, well, that sounds like a Christian. I mean, I feel like that's what people of faith do in Northwest Louisiana. They invest time in kids. So we need to understand this. Parents that have children need also to invest some time and effort in they need to invest time in children that don't have parents. And I think that's what we're all called to do. And I think that as adults, when we get involved in coaching, in pastoral ministry, in education, and coming to the schoolhouse to talk, and taking an interest in kids down the street, I believe that as we nurture these children, we're going to see the game changers that they are. We're going to see some real leaders emerge, and we're going to understand the twofold Bible admonition of not only admonition, but nurture. And that's a great question. I think if I get elected and whoever gets elected from Northwest Louisiana, they need to be willing to put their egos on the shelf and say, look, we're going to work together. Because if no one is worried about who gets the credit, some things can be done to help us. And I basically think that has to be our, working operative objective is working with other people in the legislature and being, able to communicate with them on a personal level. And I feel like I've been blessed. I know I have a working relationship with not all legislators from Northwest Louisiana, but a number of them, and that includes people that are in the legislature now and people that are running for legislative office. And I'm willing to work and say, look, the one thing that and of course, that's public dollars. The one thing I did when I was in the state Senate, and actually I think I continued it even after my term ended, or close to the end of my term, is and what does it work? Who knows? But I was writing letters to companies around the country. I was in contact with the major automobile manufacturers in America and building relationships and establishing lines of communication. Say, look, this is what Shreveport has to offer. Come here. And we have a lot to offer. We have great people. We have great churches. We have great families. We've got great faith. We've got great infrastructure with both I-20 and I-49, the Red River, the port, the airport, BIPSI, Centenary, LSUS, Louisiana Tech. We have a lot to offer. But we're going to have to address these problems. We cannot ignore crime forever. Big companies don't want to come to a crime capital. Louisiana was rated several years ago as 18th out of the 25 top homicide capitals. I think that was a study done by the Washington Post. We are going to have to address that. We are going to have to get our education solid and functional and effective, not just on the college level, but at the grade school, junior high, and high school level. We're going to go ahead and we're going to have to get our spending priorities and our spending practices sound and chiseled and refined and on point. So we're not wasting money and simply trying to grow the largest executive branch, the biggest bureaucracies in the South. And it's been historically said, and I don't have the exact statistics at my fingertips, but that Louisiana does have a disproportionately large central government bureaucracy for our per capita, for our population. So I think those are all areas that, as we work in those areas, we should see big companies knocking our doors down if we take care of the challenges that are confronting us. Well, and I don't know if you're referencing potential renewable sources. I mean, I feel like they can be an important part of the picture and it can be important to our economy. But I also believe this, that of course we have to protect the environment. But beyond that, I think that we need to allow companies generally to go ahead and focus on their business objectives and their enterprise and their plans for growth and prosperity. And I, you know, personally, my philosophy is we need to be working towards a free market, free enterprise economy, not, as opposed to a regulatory, a bureaucratic, state-funded, state-taxed, planned or controlled economy. Because as we allow, and of course I understand when companies do participate and move forward with their projects, they should be accountable to those around them for if they cause harm. But I think at the same time, I think we have great growth potential if we'll simply let these talented people, hardworking people in Louisiana and from around Louisiana and from around America come in and develop their projects with the understanding that this is a free enterprise, free market economy, not a controlled, obsessive bureaucracy, excessive regulatory framework. You know, my pastor, who is, honestly, he's a genius, but he says everything is about everything. On these blighted properties, my question is this: do we have these blighted properties if our local economy is strong? If we go ahead and hold violent criminals accountable and get them off the streets. And I remember years ago, someone who worked in the juvenile detention system said, look, 125 kids were responsible for 50% of the juvenile crime in Shreveport. And look, we don't want to throw those kids away, but they need to be held accountable, and if they're preying on other people, they need to be in jail. Once we take handle on the crime problem, once we go ahead and get rid of excessive bureaucracy, once we go ahead and address education, and I believe it, and there's a statute on the books in Louisiana that allows us to share our values. And look, I'm in favor of allowing local pastors to come in and talk to kids and give them some insight about their future. The fact of the matter is, if we will take care of our obligations and the problems ahead of us, our economy will grow, and these won't be blighted properties. Those will be properties, you know, that end up in the hands of the state and the taxing entities. They'll be properties that people buy up as places to fix up, repair, and live in. And I'm a strong believer that we're a stronger community, stronger economy, stronger Northwest Louisiana, if instead of people living in subsidized housing and in renting and property where they, if they're buying their own properties, if they're at work, if they're, you know, if we're promoting and fostering the values of family. A father, you know, it's good to have a mom and a dad in a house. That doesn't always work out. I understand that. We need to be supportive and understanding of single dads and single moms. But I think if we do the right things at the basic level with crime, education, and infrastructure, instead of us having to worry about getting rid of and unloading blighted properties, people will be buying, reinvesting, rebuilding. We can see a genesis or a regeneration in Shreveport. I believe that. And I think there's a lot of people in this city that believe that. And of course, I'm getting political now, but I feel like the election of Mayor Arsenault was important. I feel like, you know, not that he can solve everything by himself, but that he was willing to say, I want the people of Louisiana, of Shreveport, to come to the table. I want us to work together to make our city better. On the issue of crime, I was the only member of the Louisiana State Senate in the 2016-2020 term to vote that 17-year-olds should be held accountable for violent crimes. I was the only member of the Senate that actually introduced a bill that increased penalties for violent crimes. I've made a number of votes for I oppose releasing first-degree murderers on the grounds that they are primary caretakers. I know that sounds crazy. Yes, that bill made it to the Senate, got out of the House. I went to the floor and helped defeat it. I voted against reduced sentences for heroin traffickers. I voted against reduced sentencing of juvenile murder, reducing the sentences of juvenile murderers to 25 years. I oppose making juveniles convicted of murder eligible for parole after 25 years. And I've stated that if you make a violent attack on a person, that your jail time should be increased. I introduced the bill that said that. That did not get passed. I also, in the area of education, I fought Common Core. I fought for integrity in education. I fought against the adulteration of our education with morally inappropriate information, and I fought for school safety. I said if there are violent kids in the school system, the teachers should be able to remove them. I filed the Teachers' Bill of Rights to protect teachers and say that if teachers see students that are dangerous to teachers and students, that they can be removed. I filed anti-bullying bills that held bullies instead of the victims. The current law in Louisiana, because the anti-bullying bill tragically did not pass, even though several children lost their lives. They were literally bullied until they took their own lives. Those are true stories. I know the parents of some of them. But the current law is that if a child is bullied in the school system, the victim can change school systems. The bully's just allowed to stay there. It's outrageous. It's ridiculous. People start thinking, staying in Washington or Baton Rouge too long, they start thinking like politicians. I said, we need to get education back to our moral foundation and back to basics. Infrastructure, let's go ahead and do what needed to be done. Let's go ahead and, instead of hammering people with a temporary sales tax that becomes eternal, let's go ahead and cut it off, and let's go ahead and stop the net wasteful spending. Then we'll have more money for roads. Let's go ahead, and I think the legislature, and I'm not criticizing anyone personally, they should have voted against the $45 billion budget. That's about a 50% increase in the budget in about 5 years. The state budget increased, and maybe, I want to be more accurate, probably we'll say 7 years. In 7 years, the state budget increased 50%. We can do better than that. I also took on crooked and corrupt and cronyism among the licensing boards in Louisiana that were driving professionals out of the state and destroying the careers of responsible, highly educated professionals. And I think, finally, it's okay for us to get back to our moral foundation. It's entirely okay for us to recognize the leadership position in our communities that's played by the pastoral leaders of our city. They are invested in our city. They care for our families. They have something to say. I think all of us should be listening.